Before I start, I'm not an anime crackhead, nor do I hate anime, which doesn't really apply to this season actually. The show has grown beyond that.
We are what they grow beyond.
I'm just a Star Wars addict who will consume every Star Wars product no matter good or bad. Although since Disney took over, it's mostly bad. But I digress. It is part of Star Wars now, and there's nothing we can do to save it other than working so hard that we suddenly become a trillionaire and buy Star Wars from Disney at an unreasonable price. And it really doesn't matter if you don't vibe with anime. This season, the show is not even anime anymore. It has evolved so much more than just that. So with that out of the way, let's begin. Gotta say, I'm one of those who was not impressed by the first season, and most of the time I hate the first season because of my understanding of Star Wars universe is so far off from the core gist of Star Wars in my mind. I know there is a saying, anything can be Star Wars, and I absolutely 100% agree with that. But my problem is some people just use Star Wars brand power and slap it onto anything without even trying to understand what Star Wars is and how to make their stories into a Star Wars story. The biggest problem for me regarding the first season is the show seems to be made by someone who doesn't care about Star Wars. They are just people like, oh, Star Wars, I know that, the glow stick fighting movies. I'm not kidding. The first season is basically stories about lightsabers instead of the characters. If you got a lightsaber, you're a Jedi. If it turns out to be red, you're a Sith. This is just so blatantly oversimplification that shows that they have no idea what Star Wars is. But luckily, this season is like a complete 180 turn and the show is awesome. There is still something that I can nitpick about, but wow. My feeling for this season is completely opposite of how I felt for the last season. Last season, the show adopted a 2D animation approach, with each episode having a different art style. That makes sense considering the first season was completely made by Japanese studios. But the biggest upgrade this time is the show not only focuses on having a Japanese style or visuals. This season has studios from all over the world, from different countries, making their Star Wars story using any type of visual style that they want. The first season looked good and all. It was really up to personal preferences of which style you like or which one you don't. But compared to the season 2's 2D animation style, I personally think it made the first season look a little bit childish and lacking in details for some episodes. This season is a masterpiece when it comes to the animation and visuals. And not only that, this season also adopted 3D animations and some are even like claymation style. You can basically brand this season as an unofficial Japanese version of Love, Death, Robots. The visuals are always breathtaking and it really makes the whole viewing experience even more special. With each art style and animation types, all the stories are able to be presented in the most detailed way possible with the lighting, color, and minute facial expression. And the action is just fantastic to look at. Great choreography and some interesting and creative ideas to incorporate storytelling into the fights. An absolute visual and technical masterpiece. With each episode having a limited amount of runtime to tell a small and concise story, I think this season absolutely kills it in the story department. Basically every story this season interests me, and I think all of them justify the existence of this show. Instead of focusing on lightsabers, literally, they focus entirely on the plot and characters within their own unique setting and environment, which makes every story an emotional roller coaster. Okay, maybe I am being a little bit too generous. I would say maybe one episode is hard for me to get into. I'm talking about episode 7, and that disappointed me a lot as the episode is the one I feel like it is basically a mix of Clone Wars and Rebels animation style. If you watch those shows, you get what I mean. Please go watch Clone Wars and Rebels. Please, I beg you, use my knowledge.
Use my knowledge, I beg you.
And the storytelling technique is all at the highest level possible. Of course, excluding episode 7. All the stories start with a strong and powerful and efficient opening that can make me quickly get into the setting of each episode and all the new characters, making me understand what type of person they are. This makes the story so much more engaging as I can fully understand their wants, needs, and the mission as well as the obstacles in their way. I root for almost all the main characters in the season, and all of them are very interesting. Even the main characters from episode 7. Hints are also shown bit by bit throughout the story, and eventually allowed me to piece them all together and form a very satisfying ending for each episode. Now let's talk a bit about why I think episode 7 is the most lackluster one. So the next part may or may not contain spoilers. I'll try to keep it to a minimum, so feel free to use the timestamp to jump to the next section if you want. The most important reason is the storytelling technique. The other episodes let me get to the point almost instantly so I can go along with the ride. With episode 7, I get the idea that the main characters are trying to keep a low profile, and that's it. I have no idea why, I have no idea who they are hiding from, or what have they done, and what are they trying to achieve. And this goes on for almost 2/3 of the episode of just wild chase between the main characters and the bad guys. And these characters are just dumb, trying to create unnecessary drama when it can be easily avoided. That kind of dumb. I only learned the true purpose of their journey at the very end, which did make the episode a little bit more interesting by creating a whole new layer to the main character, but I think it is a little bit too late. I didn't care about anything that happened, and right before it was about to end, he just dropped a bombshell that is a great twist, but the story already ends. I don't have any time left to let this revelation sink in and re-evaluate everything else. And the episode uses the Clone Wars plus Rebels animation style, which looks absolutely gorgeous, but there are a few scenes where the model is animated very wooden and kinda out of position just a little bit. I was able to notice it quite easily, but overall it doesn't make it look bad, just feels awkward at times, like how they hug but there's an awkward amount of space between their heads, or these stormtroopers suddenly get a neck of a giraffe before awkwardly pops back to normal. It is really minuscule, but I did notice them pretty easily, and I don't know if it's just me, but the duel between the Inquisitors and the Jedi feels a bit slow and less acrobatic than it should be, which makes me think the battle looks like a Star Wars mobile game trailer type of thing. Maybe that's just me. I think the brand Star Wars really hurt the show. This season gets the gist of Star Wars a lot more than the last season, but none of the story needs to be set in a Star Wars universe. All those stories can stand on their own without the decoration of aliens, lightsabers, spaceship, or any of that. All the stories are just good character development that keeps growing while the story progresses. When I watch the show, I feel like the studios have to purposely interject some Star Wars elements into it so that they feel like they haven't wasted their money on the license, and this makes the viewing experience worse for me. For example, episode 3, In the Stars. Great story, great characters. But because they have to make these stories a Star Wars story, they just put troopers into the scenes, which is needed for the story, but they don't even give a little bit more thoughts to it. They put a bunch of snow trooper on a dry and hot planet where snow is nowhere to be found. They just put it in and never really try to understand the lore. This is the level of detail we are working with when it comes to decorating their stories with all the Star Wars stuff. They just put it in to check the box that this is a Star Wars show, which is a shame, as I think this season can totally stand on its own as a brand new anthology series that gives great story and visuals, just like how Love, Death, Robots was. Absolutely surprised by this season. I think this is a major step up from the last season with more creative minds behind the show. It completely transformed itself from an anime Star Wars series to an amazing anthology series that features Star Wars in them. The storytelling has a bigger improvement, and it is probably the best part of this amazing season. So, if you love Star Wars and love the first season, definitely check this one out. If you love the first season because it is an anime, then you might be disappointed, but I would say give it a try. Maybe you can discover that you can accept this type of mixed match art style of great storytelling. I love this season very much. What a shame, what a shame. The studios try to pull in quick cash with the brand, but they are doing such a good job that the brand itself becomes its biggest detriment. I really hope the people who gave up on the show after the first season will give this show another try, because this season is really amazing in terms of a series and not a Star Wars series. If you can watch it as a normal series that just so happened to feature Star Wars in it, I think you will have an enjoyable time. If it doesn't have Star Wars in the title, would it be better? Who knows? Branding it as a Star Wars show is definitely hurting it to some extent in terms of the viewership, as so many people might reject the show because of not being able to accept this type of Star Wars content, or just because they love hating on Star Wars, or they really don't care. But if it disposes the Star Wars and brand it as its own show, not many people will give it a try, as we are all living in an era where IP and franchises is everything mainstream. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. So just make up your own opinion on the show. If you like it, good. If you don't, it's fine. I'm just glad that I had a great time watching it.
Move along.